welcome to Turn the Page, the official podcast of the Syosset Public Library.
Welcome to Syosset Library's Turn the Page podcast. I am one of your hosts, Jessica, and my co-host today is
a very happy and fangirling Melissa.
Yes, I could tell the minute the minute we started recording, Melissa's smile just brightened to like 1,000,000 watts, and I don't blame her because I'm really excited about this too. We are here with an awesome guest, but I am going to ask you to introduce yourself and tell us about yourself and this book that's coming out.
My goodness. Well, I thank you kindly, Jessica and Melissa. It is a pleasure to be here today. My name is B. Dylan Hollis, and I'm a baker, for lack of a better word. I bake on TikTok and YouTube and Instagram and all of those places like that. And I've become known for baking recipes from yesteryear, bygone recipes from bakers, all of the wild, wacky, and wonderful things that they've come up with. And I'm here to speak on that and here to speak on my book, Baking Yesteryear, which is releasing this month. Very excited about that, which is a compilation, sort of the best of the wild, wacky, and wonderful recipes from years past.
I'm so excited to just get my hands on that book. So obviously your cookbook probably has the best of the best that you've cooked, but I have to ask you, out of all the TikTok foods you've made, what's your favorite? What's your least favorite? And which one surprised you the most that we were like, I can't believe this is good? Because I've seen your reaction where you're just like, I can't believe this. How did this turn out phenomenal?
Yeah, so some of the things that our past generations came up with are astounding, astonishing, surprising, sometimes horrifying. But I mean, through all of that which I've tried, I've had the pleasure of trying and baking some real fantastic things. One that I always cite is a chocolate potato cake from around 1912. It's this chocolate cake. It's a pretty normal batter. Except it has, it uses a half a cup roughly of a russet potato, which adds this special starchy moisture to it. And the chocolate isn't cocoa powder or anything like that. It's a grated chocolate bar, which doesn't quite melt when baked. So you get this very interesting texture. It's almost banana bread-like. The chocolate potato cake is just one of the good old, easy, good tasting cakes from yesteryear. I always speak about that. But then, as you mentioned, there's a lot of surprising things that I come across as well. And I think in recent memory, perhaps the one that keeps astounding me, despite the fact that I've baked it over and over again since, is this thing called a pinto bean cake from the 1950s. It's a gluten-free cake, which is bound by nothing but pinto beans, honey, peanuts, a whole bunch of eggs. And you make this thing, you grind up all of these pinto beans, which you're used to using in savory dishes, and you pour it into a springform pan, and lo and behold, it comes up this beautiful, moist, spongy, rich cake. And things like that just surprise me. So that's perhaps the most surprising one recently. And then there are some wild and horrifying ones as well, which I can speak on if you'd like.
Please, because it's so funny. I'll watch your TikToks, and it makes me laugh because I'll be like, oh, come on, what? Like I'll just see the title of it, and I'll be like, no, there's no way. And then you're just like, this isn't bad.
There was one recipe you made that I still make to this day, and that's the dirt cake. And you were like, this is the most American thing ever. And I'm like, I still make this. And as soon as you said, oh my God, kids would be like on a sugar high on this, I was like, yeah, that's kind of what it's for.
Yeah, I had not ever, me not being an American, I had never heard of dirt cake. I had never, tasted it. After I had made it, I come to learn that it's very popular in the United States, with kids and birthday parties. But, imagine me, a foreigner, just thumbing through this cookbook. And then, you see the ingredients and you see the name first of which really catches your attention. And then, it's a cake, but it doesn't have any cake ingredients. And then there's gummy worms in there. And I'm like, what on is this? And then of course, yeah, I was proved wrong. It is this fantastic, silky, I don't know why they use the name cake. You serve it with a spoon. It's a bit of a pudding. Where I'm from, we would call it, like a trifle. It's very similar to a trifle. But yeah, sugar, gummy worms, and just if you want to be bouncing off the walls for a good 45 minutes, I say dirt cake's your go-to.
All the energy that you need. Jess, you have a question?
I'm just fascinated by this. It's so funny because we're talking about, all of these recipes that are, like obscure. But then when you talk about something like dirt cake as an American, I'm like, I know exactly what that is. That is 100%. Yeah.
Yeah, I the same thing came to me with like snickerdoodles, which I had not heard of. I before I saw it in a cookbook, I thought it was a breed of dog, and then it's I make
Fair.
this I make this recipe, and it was a very old recipe for snickerdoodles. And yeah, the comments were like, "What? I can't believe you've never had a snickerdoodle." My family has been making this for years. We have these, recipes passed down generation to generation. And the recipe that I read, that I baked from, was for, like I said, from a very old cookbook. And the instructions were to roll the cookies in the sugar and the cinnamon post baking, which, the further back you go, sort of the progenitors of these well-beloved recipes, you'll find some strange variations there. And of course, as they entered, public belovedness, then one method seems to be concretely, that is how you bake this cookie. And I got roasted like a marshmallow on a campfire, saying, no, you're supposed to roll the snickerdoodles before you bake them. And I'm like, look, I'm just reading the recipe. But I mean, it turned out fantastic. And I've tried them, rolling before, which, yeah, it's a bit better. But still, yeah, the snickerdoodles as well, one of those things.
It's like you're supposed to refrigerate the wheat germ. It's still shavings, no matter how you paint it. It's shavings. Which, speaking of these like unbelievable ingredients, where do you find them? Sometimes, I mean, I feel like I haven't gone to a supermarket and seen lard in eons. Do you Amazon it? Like,
no, yeah, well, you brought up wheat germ, which is among like my top 5 nemesis ingredients, lard being probably number 1. Wheat germ, yeah, unless you have a real like fiber problem, or, you have a craving for sawdust, I don't see any need to consume wheat germ. But you speak of lard in a lot of these old ingredients, and, lard, at least in, the state of Wyoming that I frequent, you'll find lard. It's kind of hidden. It's on the bottom shelf, and it's used a lot in deep frying, which, despite my hatred for it, deep frying with lard is quite good. You're doing your corn dogs, maybe you're just even frying chicken. Lard's good for that. But yeah, lard is easy enough to get a hold of. Wheat germ, surprisingly, is easy enough to get a hold of, but I don't go that far back in time to find enough very bizarre ingredients. There's a contemporary of mine on YouTube, speaking of old-timey recipes, by the name of Max Miller. He has a program called Tasting History, and he sort of goes back into recipes from antiquity. And that's where you start finding some really obscure ingredients, some varieties of spices that have gone extinct, things like garum, sort of Roman recipes. But sort of my sort of wheelhouse, 1890s to the 1980s, the ingredients that are used and called for are, you can still find them. They're not that odd. There's some leavening agents, like, baker's ammonia, ammonium carbonate, which is, literally just smelling salts. Those are hard to get a hold of. Yeah, they used to bake cookies with smelling salts. Very bizarre. But yeah, wheat germ and lard, I stock them, not willingly, but because it's what I do, and it helps with exploration.
And what about like the recipes in general? Did you happen upon them one day and now, you just collect them, or fans send them to you, or?
Yeah, well, I started this journey. I don't, it's just the right place, the right time, and just, lady luck being on one side. It was during the COVID-19 pandemic, and all of us were very bored, and many people took up new hobbies, new pastimes, and they were also on the internet a lot more than they were previously. So, TikTok was booming at the time, so I had downloaded the app during the quarantine, as a way to pass time. And then I was also incredibly bored, yeah, because the university had shuttered its doors, all classes were online. And I had always been a collector of all things yesteryear. I drive a 1963 Cadillac. It's my daily driver. I collect old records. I collect old books. And among the old books that I collect were cookbooks. So, one summer day in 2020, I was thumbing through this old cookbook that I got from an estate sale. And I come across this recipe called pork cake. And it's a fruitcake recipe, which already is a polarizing subject. And snuggled firmly in the ingredients list was a pound of ground pork. And I sat there with one eyebrow cocked to the heavens, and I said, is this for real? Is this a typo? Is this a practical joke? You've got a pound of ground pork in a cake, and you're supposed to serve it to people, and this is a special occasion. And I said, there's no way. I need to show the internet this. The internet loves all sorts of wacky, bizarre things. And I said, okay, let's put these things together. I'll record a video. I'll show people how, very bizarre this is. And there's no way it's going to taste good. It's going to be a disaster. And that was my first baking video I uploaded in August of 2020 for the pork cake, which the recipe happens to be in baking yesteryear. Changed, of course, because recipes from time past were merely just sort of a list of ingredients. But yeah, I tasted it, and I still say to this day, it tastes like a question mark, a good question mark. And that started the baking in my kitchen just behind me as I'm recording this. And yeah, people took a liking to it. And now you're correct. I get most of my cookbooks from my post office box, my little post office here. They hate me because they get, metric tons. I can't build bookshelves fast enough. It's really a privilege to not only save these cookbooks, but to experience history through ingredients lists.
I remember, as you can see, I'm like an OG fan, because I remember when you first uploaded that video, and all I could think of was, did Rachel Green make this cookbook? Because it reminded me of her English trifle that I have on episode. And I was just hooked ever since. And I was like, I've got to watch this. And it's just, you brighten my day. You make me so happy. It's like one of the best things of my week. It's so much fun.
Well, that's very kind of you. And I think, why people seem to take a liking to it is because I began to take a liking to baking in general. All of my videos, I had not baked prior to 2020. And what I was recording was, on a shallow level, I thought was just, content. But, behind that, as I started thumbing through dusty cookbooks, I was like, wow, this is actually not only a really fun hobby, the historical context is interesting, to see year compared to other years, how other decades dealt with, say, ingredient shortages, how, the 1970s were just, people must have been on pounds of illicit substances, how people in the, the 1920s, they loved gelatin so much that, you'd think they'd set their couch in gelatin. And yeah, I think my love for baking blossomed on camera. And I think when you enjoy something and you're just having fun and you're making something and it's a pleasure to be able to laugh at cookbooks and have fun with the absurdity that comes out of them. And I think I fell in love with baking. And I think that's why people sort of like the content.
I'm, just kind of going over some of the things we were, the questions, and I know, this is like from Melissa and myself. What made you come up with your cookbook is one of the questions, and like just thinking about it, also starting from TikTok, which is media, and then kind of moving towards book, which is a little bit more traditional. How did that go? Was it very surreal for you? And Melissa, if you want to add anything, please feel free.
Well, like you said, he's into all things antique, and books are one of the first forms of media and the first form of getting information out. So I'm very excited that he's kind of looking at this like antiquated way of media. I love that as a librarian myself.
Yeah, and some of it's books. There's something extremely special about books and how it's able to share interest, share love, share context, share stories with people. And that's what TikTok does as well. But it's very different to have something before you. And I love, I read a book a night. And I say that because I read a cookbook a night, these little cookbooks, and I read them like novels. And the comments we were speaking previously about, how people, how much they sort of like my content, they engage with it. And among the comments were always like, wow, you should do a cookbook. You should have or merch or things like that. And I'm not one of these, social media Los Angeles people, and I'm not a cook or a chef. And I saw I don't know, a sort of hole where cookbooks these days are all the, 350-hour brownies or the paleo vegan, gluten-free, cruelty-free, strange things, and all of these recipes to impress those before you instead of the really old school, pure enjoyment of having something sweet and good to eat. And I don't think that there is a better way to further share that which I do on the internet with people who want to consume that content than offering a book. And it's a great privilege to be able to, compile not only my love for yesteryear, but to share the joys of our bygone bakers with a broader populace. And I mean, I do recipes on my TikTok, and cookbooks are one of the easiest way to share recipes, and it's just another way to share that passion. And that's sort of how it came to be. I had always been toying around with it because of all the modern cookbooks that I have, I didn't see any that were in the format that Baking Yesteryear is to be, which is comparing recipes structured decade by decade. And that's a very fun way, I think, to experience the bakery in general. So I said, let's put one out there. And I think people are going to like it a great deal because it's fantastic.
I have a bit of a silly question. Is your slang in this cookbook?
I think I would be remiss not to insert my slang and my, if you can call it humor. It was really fun, workshopping all of these recipes because, most all of them were built from the ground up. I had mentioned earlier how, especially the older the recipes they are, you really need to workshop them, rewrite them. Some of these recipes, didn't have any methods, didn't tell you what temperature to bake, didn't even tell you what to bake the item in. So it was fun working on that and writing recipes in a modern sense, metrification as well. So our friends, across the pond and those who like to bake by weight can do it. But I'd say the most fun part was, writing. I was able to pretend to be a novelist for all of the introductions of these recipes. I wax poetic with my slang and with my humor that I really like to try and get across. I didn't want it to just be a cookbook. I wanted to be, half story. So it's, you've got a lot of sass and you've got a lot of old school baking.
And I don't think since I started watching you since 2020, I've said cinnamon normally. And like I'm not a big baker, but like when I do need it, or eggs, I use eggs a lot. I don't think I've said eggs normally. It's just caught on into my vernacular so easily. I'm like, this guy's gonna think I'm crazy during this interview because I just know you so well from like watching your TikToks.
Yes, I sometimes wish when I'm in the grocery store that I would have just, stickers of the letter Y so I could plaster them on the eggs, so everything is eggies and synonym. I can't say synonym correctly anymore. I warn people. They say, I've started saying synonym. I say you can't say it too often, lest you actually forget how to say cinnamon. And it's very peculiar. I mean, I'll be in, at a traffic light at an intersection, and I'll have someone in the 2010, F-150 roll down their window and just shout eggy at me. And I say, my goodness gracious. It's one of those things that I don't understand how those things become beloved. I am just an overgrown child. So I like to have fun in very, stupid senses like that, mispronouncing things. Baking powder makes things floof up. Hence, I'm going to call it floof powder. Synonym is a, I don't know. I'm still, like I say, I'm still a child, so I still pronounce it that way. And it's another way to show that, you can still have fun in the kitchen. It's not all about the sum of ingredients. And I think there's something to be said about the joys of being immature, and I'll stand by that.
I just have to say, one of the things that I love about that too, and just the way that you were sort of describing it is, and I find it funny because Melissa was like worried, like, is he going to think I'm weird saying this on an interview that we have planned? But then you're like, no, people shouted at me when I'm in my car. One thing I love about it is that it gives such a natural connection between you and the people who are going to be reading your book, and who watch your videos. I mean, when you have friends for a while, and on TikTok in 2020, we were all friends because who else were we talking to?
Yeah.
You come up with these jokes, like my best friend and I have been best friends for over 20 years, and we have these ridiculous in-jokes that we say and we blurt out, and people are just like, what is wrong with you? And then my husband and I are the same way. Like, we'll say these things and people are like, we're not using video here, so I'm making a look like, what is wrong with you? But what I love about what you were just saying about the cinnamon and the eggies and the fruit is it feels like, these are in jokes between you and your viewers, and also who are going to be your readers. They're going to be able to open this book and they're going to be like, Eggy, I know, yep, this is where we're going with this, and I love it.
Yeah, it's all about having fun. I mentioned earlier how a lot of the cooking or sort of baking content on the internet now is, very elitely produced. You go on Instagram and you scroll through and you've got these, beautiful, lemon shaved tarts, expert, cream tarts, and it's filmed in the glowing golden hour of a New York City high-rise apartment kitchen, marble countertops, and all of this. And in many ways, I say, that's not how people are baking. That's not how people are cooking. And in many ways, it seems unapproachable. And baking and cooking in general, when it comes to content that is consumed, whether it be on, television or the internet or in movies, it's always at a very, very high level. And I wanted to share, because it was my experience, that the amateur joys of baking are just as important. You can have fun throwing a boxed brownie mix, in a bowl with some oil and some eggs with your kids, and shouting obscenities. And that is baking, and that is valid, and that is approachable. And I wanted to share, a cookbook in that sense, and my content in that sense is that, cooking is not just for the elite. And, my phrases are a way to hopefully get that across. The jokes as well, because, I don't think life is serious enough, have at least something, be it baking or my content, that is unserious.
I vote we name your fans the Aggies.
The
eggy fandom, is that what brand?
Every fandom needs a name. I mean, you know what, we'll submit that as our suggestion. If the Eggy fandom has any objections or would like to call themselves something else, they can also submit it. But we're turn the page.
His next TikTok, he'll be like, "Hi, Aggies," and everyone will just be like,
Oh
"Okay."
gosh, we wish.
I think Eggy would win in a poll.
This has been so much fun.
Oh my gosh.
Melissa, do you have any other things?
I just want to thank you so much for doing this, and I cannot wait to get my hands on that book. I am so excited. I'm counting down the days. And I can't wait to be baking yesteryear with you and Frank, because I miss Frank very much.
Yes, Frank, my potted plant in the kitchen. Well, yeah, Frank and I thank you too as well. It's always, I love it when anyone is willing to listen to me blab on about baking. And this was a great deal of fun. I thank you kindly.
Thank you.
We thank you so much, and thank you for everybody at your publishing house, Penguin Random House, who helped us get this together. Sometimes I have to say, sometimes we get these ideas, and we're just like, we would really like to jump on this. We'd love to interview this person, and it's a matter of like pulling the strings at the right time and throwing it and just being like, is this going to happen? I like to say throwing spaghetti against the wall, which actually makes a lot of sense in the context of this. And sometimes that spaghetti lands in our plate, and thank you for landing in our plate.
Yes, of course. It was a pleasure to redirect your thrown spaghetti.
New recipe alert.
Spaghetti. Once again, this was the Syosset Libraries Turn the Page podcast. I was one of your hosts. I still am, Jessica, but I'm saying this in the past tense. Jessica, and my librarian co-host is
The #1 Aggie fan, Melissa.
And our guest was, and still is,
B. Dylan Hollis. I thank you kindly.
author of Baking Yesteryear. And if people want to find you on TikTok, where can they find you?
I'm at B. Dylan Hollis on TikTok. You can search my name. Instagram's the same. And yeah, excited for you guys to get a hold of the book.
We are going to close this chapter of Turn the Page.
It's time to close this chapter of Turn the Page. Join us for the next episode.